Ever had one of those moments where you just shouldn't have made it, but somehow you did? Maybe you slipped on ice, did an accidental backflip, and landed like a pro? Or missing a flight, only to find out later that the plane had issues? Well, as wild as that sounds, some people have taken survival to a whole new level, escaping situations so deadly they make action movies look tame. From a man who survived both atomic bombings to a pilot who crash-landed in the ocean and swam for days, here are 15 real-life stories of people who cheated death in the most insane ways. Number 15. Julianne Kupka. A plane crash in the middle of the Amazon rainforest is an instant death for most people. But Julianne Kupka, at just 17 years old, managed to do the impossible. In 1971, her plane was struck by lightning mid-flight, tearing the aircraft apart at 10,000 feet. She was ejected from the plane, still strapped to her seat, and plummeted into the dense jungle canopy. Instead of dying on impact, she somehow survived, with a broken collarbone, deep wounds, and a concussion. But her struggle was far from over. With no supplies, she relied on basic survival instincts, following a small river, avoiding poisonous creatures, and fighting through infection and exhaustion. After 11 grueling days, she stumbled upon a logging camp where workers rescued her. She was the sole survivor of the crash. Julianne's survival is one of the most unbelievable stories in aviation history, a true example of resilience, instinct, and the human will to live. Number 14. Jose Salvador Alvarenga. Being stranded at sea for a few days is terrifying. Now, imagine 438 days, alone, with nothing but the vast Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly around you. That was the brutal reality for Jose Salvador Alvarenga, a Salvadoran fisherman who miraculously survived one of the longest castaway ordeals in history. In 2012, Alvarenga set off from Mexico with a crewmate for a routine fishing trip. But a sudden storm wrecked their boat and pushed them far beyond rescue range. With no land in sight and their engine dead, they drifted helplessly for over a year. His companion didn't make it, leaving Alvarenga completely alone. He survived by catching fish, turtles, and drinking rainwater, battling sharks, dehydration, and the crushing loneliness. Finally, after drifting 6,700 miles, he washed ashore in the Marshall Islands, over a year later. His survival wasn't just a miracle, it was a testament to the sheer willpower of the human body and mind. Number 13. Aron Ralston. Getting stuck in a tight spot is one thing. Sawing off your own arm to survive? That's next level. In 2003, Aron was hiking alone in Utah's Blue John Canyon when a 1,000-pound boulder dislodged and pinned his right arm. With no cell signal and no one knowing where he was, his situation went from bad to worse. For 5 excruciating days, Ralston rationed his limited food and water, even drinking his own urine to stay alive. But when dehydration, hallucinations, and impending death set in, he made a brutal choice. He had to cut off his own arm. Using a dull multi-tool, he broke his own bones and severed muscle, nerve, and tendon, all without painkillers. Somehow, he hiked 6 miles to safety, where rescuers found him. His unbelievable survival story inspired the film 127 Hours, proving that when faced with impossible choices, the human will to live knows no limits. Now let's be honest, will you go that far to save your life? Number 12. Roy Sullivan. Some people are unlucky, and then there's Roy. The Virginia park ranger didn't just get hit by lightning once or twice. He got struck 7 times, earning him the Guinness World Record for most lightning strikes survived. It started in 1942 when he was hiding from a storm. Lightning ignored his hiding spot and struck him anyway. Over the years, he was hit while in a truck, in a forest, in his own front yard, and even while fishing. One strike set his hair on fire, another burned his legs, and one even knocked him unconscious. Despite these electrifying experiences, Sullivan somehow walked away from each strike. Statistically, the odds of one person getting hit 7 times? Practically zero. Yet Sullivan cheated death every time until he passed away in 1983, thankfully not from lightning. His life is proof that nature has a twisted sense of humor, and some people are just too stubborn to be taken down by the odds. Number 11. Bouncing Betty. If you think having a bad day sucks, Betty Lou Oliver would like a word. In July 1945, she was working as an elevator attendant on the 80th floor of the Empire State Building when disaster struck. A B-25 bomber, piloted by an overconfident World War II captain, flew straight into the building, exploding on impact. Betty was thrown across the room, breaking her pelvis, back, and neck. But her bad luck wasn't over yet. As first responders carried her into an elevator to take her down, the crash had weakened the cables. The second the doors closed, the cables snapped. Betty plummeted 75 floors, over 1,000 feet, straight down the shaft. Somehow she survived again. The free-falling elevator cables hit the ground first, creating a shock-absorbing cushion that saved her life. Despite breaking nearly everything, Betty made a full recovery in just 8 months. At this point, I'm convinced she was made of rubber. What do you think? Was it luck? Number 10. Niagara Falls Survivor. Niagara Falls is beautiful, but it's also deadly. And yet, in July 2019, a mystery man decided that taking a 188-foot drop down the falls sounded like a fun idea. In the early morning hours, witnesses saw him climb over the retaining wall at the largest of the falls, dive into the water, and get swept straight over the edge. At that height, most people don't survive, especially since Niagara Falls is packed with jagged boulders beneath the water. But somehow, he didn't just survive. He was found sitting at the bottom with only minor injuries. Turns out, Lake Erie was experiencing record-high water levels, which increased the flow of the falls. This extra push of momentum actually helped him overshoot the dangerous rocks, landing him in deeper, safer waters. So, what's the moral of the story? Well, it is pretty simple. Don't try this, if you love your life and wife. He might have cheated death, but Niagara Falls isn't handing out second chances. Number 9. Vesna Vulovic. Imagine plummeting from 33,333 feet, a height where survival isn't just unlikely, it's scientifically impossible. Now imagine living to tell the tale. That's exactly what happened to Vesna Vulovic, a Yugoslav flight attendant who holds the Guinness World Record for surviving the highest fall without a parachute. It was 1972, and Jet Flight 367 was cruising over Czechoslovakia when a sudden explosion tore the aircraft apart. In an instant, Vulovic found herself free-falling at terminal velocity. But against all odds, she survived, becoming the sole survivor of the crash. How? A combination of luck, physics, and sheer resilience. She landed in thick snow, cushioned by the wreckage of the fuselage. Her injuries were brutal, a fractured skull, crushed legs, and a broken spine, but she defied medical expectations and made a full recovery. Vulovic's story is one of the most astonishing tales of survival ever recorded, a reminder that sometimes, even when fate deals the worst hand, the human spirit refuses to fold. Number 8. Harrison O'Keefe. Imagine being trapped 100 feet underwater in total darkness, with only an air pocket keeping you alive. That's exactly what happened to Harrison O'Keefe, a Nigerian cook, in 2013 when his tugboat capsized off the coast of Nigeria. For 3 agonizing days, O'Keefe sat in a tiny air pocket, surrounded by icy water and the lifeless bodies of his crewmates. With no food, no light, and no certainty of rescue, he clung to hope, reciting prayers in the pitch-black abyss. Then, against all odds, rescue divers searching for bodies stumbled upon him. The shock on their faces was priceless. They weren't expecting to find a living person. Using a carefully controlled decompression process, they brought him safely to the surface. O'Kane's survival was nothing short of miraculous, proving that sometimes, even in the deepest, darkest places, life can still fight back. Today, he's known as the man who lived at the bottom of the sea. Now let's move to number 7, Ricky Miggy. The Australian outback is one of the harshest environments on Earth, yet Ricky Miggy survived it for 71 days with nothing but his instincts and sheer willpower. In 2006, Miggy was on a road trip when his car broke down in the middle of nowhere. Stranded in scorching heat with no food, water, or shelter, he was left to die. For weeks, he scavenged whatever he could find, eating bugs, roadkill, and plants while drinking dirty water to stay alive. Dehydration ravaged his body, and he fought off dingoes and snakes, all while his weight dropped to a skeletal 100 pounds. After 71 brutal days, a passing farmer spotted him and rescued him. His story shocked the world, proving that even in the most hopeless situations, the human body and mind can endure the unimaginable. So, never lose hope and trust in yourself. Loser can't do much. Number 6. Michalina Lewandowska. Being buried alive is the stuff of nightmares, but for Michalina, it became a horrifying reality. In 2011, the Polish woman's ex-partner kidnapped her, tied her up, and buried her in a wooden box, all because he wanted to be rid of her. But Michalina wasn't about to let him win. Using nothing but sheer determination, she clawed at the wooden box with her engagement ring, chipping away at the coffin-like prison bit by bit. Dirt piled in, suffocating her, but she kept going. After a desperate, agonizing struggle, she broke through the surface, alive, gasping, and more determined than ever. She ran to the police, and her ex was arrested. Her survival wasn't just a miracle, it was a statement. Underestimating a determined person is the biggest mistake you can make. Number 5. Bitter cold Bogenholm. Skiing is fun, until it's not. Swedish radiologist Anna Bogenholm learned this the hard way in 1999 when an innocent ski trip turned into a world record survival story. Anna was racing down the Narvik Mountains when she suddenly lost control. Before she could stop, she crashed headfirst through an 8-inch thick frozen stream, getting completely trapped beneath the ice. Her friends found her immediately, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't pull her out. Miraculously, Anna found a tiny air pocket to breathe through. But after 40 minutes of struggling, the freezing water finally shut her body down. Her heart stopped beating. By the time rescuers finally got her out, she had 0 signs of life. But thanks to a team of 100 doctors working non-stop for 9 hours, they brought her back. Her body temperature had dropped to 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit, the lowest ever recorded in a living human. Somehow, she survived without any brain damage. Number 4. A mother's fight for survival amidst chaos. When 19-year-old Gofran Amar Diab set out for a routine maternity checkup near Mosul, Iraq, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. As she sat in the clinic, ISIS militants stormed her neighborhood. By the time she stepped outside, her husband had vanished. Alone and terrified, Diab searched for him but never found him again. A kind woman, Sahar, took her in, offering temporary shelter. But survival was brutal. Food was scarce, and phone use was banned, cutting Diab off from her family. For 4 months, she lived on spoonfuls of tomato paste mixed with water. When it came time to give birth, there was no hospital, only Sahar's sister assisting the delivery. Her baby, Naba, which means the great news, was born dangerously underweight at under 3 pounds. Against all odds, both mother and child survived, eventually making it back to Diab's mother, a true testament to resilience. Number 3. Ewa Wisniewska. Paragliding is supposed to be thrilling, not a near-death experience at 32,000 feet. In 2007, German paraglider Ewa was competing in Australia's Paragliding World Championship when she was sucked into a monstrous thunderstorm. The storm ripped her from the sky, lifting her higher than Mount Everest. At that altitude, oxygen is almost non-existent, and temperatures drop to minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. She lost consciousness for over an hour, her body encased in ice as she drifted higher and higher. Then, something incredible happened. Her paraglider stabilized as she descended back into breathable air. Against all odds, she regained consciousness mid-flight. With frozen limbs and no feeling in her body, she somehow landed safely, alive, but barely able to move. Wisniewska's survival was a medical mystery, and to this day, no one else has survived such extreme conditions mid-air. If there's a real-life proof of human resilience, this is it. Number 2. Dr. Leonid Rogozov. Being the only doctor in Antarctica sounds cool, until you need emergency surgery. In 1961, Soviet surgeon Dr. Leonid Rogozov developed acute appendicitis while on an expedition in Antarctica. The problem? The nearest hospital was thousands of miles away, and the frozen wasteland made evacuation impossible. With no choice, Rogozov did the unthinkable. He performed surgery on himself. Armed with basic tools and a mirror, he cut into his abdomen, navigated through his organs, and removed his inflamed appendix, all while battling excruciating pain and near-fatal blood loss. Amazingly, the surgery was a success, and within 2 weeks, he was back on his feet. His self-operation remains one of the most legendary acts of survival in medical history, proving that when there's no way out, the human mind can make the impossible happen. Number 1. Saved by a smartphone. People always say we're too hooked on our smartphones, but one Ukrainian soldier would strongly disagree. During a heated battle, his squad came under heavy fire. As bullets rained down, one found its mark, right in his chest. He hit the ground, bracing for the worst. But instead of bleeding out, he found this. His smartphone, shattered but intact, had absorbed the full impact of a 7.62 millimeter bullet, stopping it dead in its tracks. Even crazier, a metal dog tag he was wearing helped block the bullet even more. The result? A completely intact soldier and a very dead phone. I don't know about you, but I've never been more grateful for screen protectors. Meanwhile, phone insurance companies are out here covering cracked screens, while this guy's phone literally saved his life. We really hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.